Hi there, Dave here from Music Education Network, and in this video we'll show you how to assemble the Music EDnet CS61 and CS49 creation stations. So let's get started. Ensure you have all the required components as follows to begin. One desktop, one modesty panel, one left side panel, one right side panel, a cable rack and clip-on power board, and the slide-out MIDI piano keyboard tray and screw-on running tracks. You should also make sure you have the following screws and screw plugs: 4 cable rack screws, 3 running track screws for the slide-out tray left-hand side, 3 running track screws for the slide-out tray right-hand side, 7 connector bolts to go into the desktop, and 4 connector bolts to go into the side panels. Let's move on to preparing the side panels. Insert 2 connector bolts in each of the side panels using the holes circled if the cable rack is to be on the inside of the desk as shown here. If the cable rack is to be on the outside rear of the desk as shown in this alternate picture, then you can pop these plastic caps off the side panels and swap the stopper screws underneath them around so you can put the connector bolts in the alternate holes instead. We'll assemble the desk with the cable rack on the inside of the desk on this occasion. Use a manual Phillips head screwdriver for this, and don't do them up too tight. Just get to the point where they stop at the end of the thread, then turn it a little more to lock them in place. Now insert the 7 connector bolts in the desktop screw holes to get the result you see here. Remember, like we did previously with the side panels, just get to the point where they stop at the end of the thread, then turn each a little more to lock them in place. Once again, if the cable rack is to be on the outside rear of the desk as shown here, you would use the 3 alternate holes shown on screen, just as we mentioned with regard to the side panels in the previous step. This will give you the following alternate result. Screw the right and left side running tracks onto the slide-out tray as follows. It's okay to use an electric screwdriver for these if you have one, but don't overdo it when they're getting tight. Now screw the cable rack onto the modesty panel as follows. As in step 4, it's okay to use an electric screwdriver for these if you have one, but remember not to overdo it when they're getting tight. If applicable, clip on the power board as shown here. This may not apply to the desk you've purchased, as it's only the CS61P and CS49P that contain the power board by default. We're now ready to connect the modesty panel to the side panels. Turn the left-hand side panel upside down so it matches the image here. Now turn the modesty panel upside down, with the cable rack on the inside or outside as per your requirement, and line up the end bolt holes on the modesty panel with the connector bolts you previously screwed into the left hand side panel. Gently ease it in so the modesty panel end becomes flush with the face of the side panel. If it will not allow the connector bolts to enter the holes in the modesty panel, you can turn the connector cam next to each hole a little to make the cam hole line up with the hole in the modesty panel properly. Usually the little arrow on the connector cam points to the hole in the cam itself, so if you turn them so the cam arrows line up with the holes in the modesty panel, it should be okay. You're now ready to tighten up the connector cam for each bolt by turning each clockwise with a screwdriver until you feel it lock onto the connector bolt. Generally, it's a half turn that results in the arrow on the cam pointing in the opposite direction to where it started. Now turn the right hand side panel upside down so it matches the image here. And line up, connect and tighten the connector bolts for this side, just as we did in step 6. Now you're ready to line up the upside down underframe with the upside down desktop as shown here. It's best to have 2 people on the job at this point, as lifting the underframe onto the desktop and lining it up with the connector bolts can be difficult for one person. You also want to ensure the side panels stay parallel to each other and stay at 90 degrees to the modesty panel and do not move too much, as it's possible to break them away from the modesty panel in this vulnerable state and thus damage the side panels and or the modesty panel itself. As in step 6 and 7, if it will not allow the connector bolts to enter the holes in the top edge of the modesty panel and side panels, you can turn the connector cam next to each hole a little to make the cam hole line up with the holes in the modesty and side panel properly. You can see that some of them are being a bit stubborn here, so I've had to turn a couple, then apply a little more pressure down on the modesty panel to get the frame all the way onto the connector bolts. You're now ready to tighten up the connector cam for each bolt as before by turning each clockwise with a screwdriver until you feel it lock onto the connector bolts. Now you can rotate the desk the right way up. Once again, this is best done with 2 people. Gently roll the desk forward onto its front, then roll in the same direction to finish with it the right way up. Now we're ready to insert the slide out tray. Line up and ease on the track runner on each side with the corresponding component on the pre-installed running mechanism of each side panel as shown here. Now apply gentle pressure evenly on both sides to slide the tray in about halfway where it will get tighter. Make sure it's still lined up straight with the front edge of the desktop, then apply more pressure to push the tray all the way in until you hear it click in place, which indicates it's locked in. And it's done, so now you can move on to assembling the next one.